Okay, so this is the second class about the laws of Purim. Last time we covered Parsha Zachar, which was this past Shabbos, and then we also talked about Matanos Lavyonim, gifts to the poor, the Purim Suda, the Purim meal, and Mishlach Manos. If anyone has any questions about that, feel free to ask or to let me know. Today we'll discuss the laws of the Megillah reading, and then also some customs of Purim and Al Anisim as well, the additions for that we add in benching and that we add in our davening. Okay. So in terms of the Megillah reading, so before we get to the Megillah reading itself, and there's in general the halacha is that when a person is obligated to do a mitzvah, so they shouldn't eat before they do that mitzvah, right? So for example, when it's time to light the Hanukkah candles, don't eat before you light the Hanukkah candles. That's the general rule. And then light the Hanukkah candles right away. And the point of that is that once a person sits down, they're eating, they have a meal, then all of a sudden you forget about the mitzvah. The same thing is true when it comes to the Megillah, that once a person is obligated to read the Megillah, once the obligation starts, so a person should not eat before they fulfill that mitzvah. Now, when it comes to Purim, it's obviously going to be a little harder than when it comes to Hanukkah. Why? Because when it comes to Purim, most of us are going to be fasting up until the Megillah. Most of us are fasting up until that point. So if you're fasting until Megillah reading, now to have to wait another 45 minutes, to have to wait another hour to break your fast could be very difficult, especially this year. It's much later than last year. We've already changed the clocks, and it's a little later in the year. So it could really be very late by the time we're done, especially also if you're going to the second Megillah reading, right? We always do two Megillah readings so that if someone is home with children or for whatever reason can't come to the first reading, they come to the second reading. So really you shouldn't eat till after that, and that could be hours after the fast is over by the time you finish and get home. So again, really the halacha is ideally a person should not eat until doesn't matter when they hear the Megillah, they shouldn't eat until the Megillah reading is over. But especially because it's so late and because you've been fasting the whole day, so therefore, if a person needs to, there are certain leniencies, which means that if a person is not going to have a meal, a person's just going to sit down and they're going to have a snack. They're going to have a fruit, a drink, a cup of coffee. So that would be okay. And if you're going to have mezonos or hamotzi, if you're going to have bread or cookies or cake, something like that, if you want to have a small amount, that would also be okay. But you should have less than the amount of a kibetza, less than the amount of an egg. That would be okay. And if you're going to do that, then you should either set yourself a reminder, set some kind of alarm to remind you to go to hear the Megillah. So like, for example, we're doing the second reading at 9:30. So you set an alarm on your phone for 9:15, or have someone remind you. And especially if you do both of those things, it could be technically either one of those two is enough, but especially if you do both of those things, meaning that you only have a small amount of food, you don't have a full meal, and you set an alarm. If you do both those things, so then you're really covered. And again, ideally, if a person could wait, it's better to wait. But if a person is very hungry, then they could definitely rely on the lenient opinions. If the person has a hard time fasting, they're going to be sick. So then it's definitely okay to rely on the lenient opinions. And to go ahead and break their fast again with a small snack. Technically, and it's not only if you're going to the second reading, even if you're going to the first reading, if you don't fast well, or for whatever reason you're having a hard time fasting, so you could bring a small snack with you to show. Right? You have to look at exactly what time the fast is over, but as soon as the fast is over, there's usually a couple minutes. There will be a couple minutes between then and the Megillah reading, so you can have a light snack at that point. And again, make sure to set a reminder as well, because the whole reason why we don't want you to eat is you don't forget to do a mitzvah. So if you set a reminder or ask someone to remind you, so then it would be okay to eat before the Megillah reading. Okay, when it comes to the Megillah reading itself, so very, very important is that when a person hears the Megillah, they must hear every single word from Vayibme Chashverish all the way to the end, every single word. If you miss one word, if you don't hear one word, so then you do not fulfill your mitzvah, and really you should go back and hear it again. The time to hear the Megillah at night is the whole night. So if you realized, even if you're at the end of, let's say, the second reading, you should try to find someone who can read the Megillah for you again, because again, we want you to fulfill that mitzvah. There's a very famous story in Ner Yisrael. Happened way before my time when I was there, Ner Yisrael in Baltimore, where they read the Megillah, and someone had recorded the reading of the Megillah because he wanted to practice for himself. So he recorded it, and then he was going to listen to it afterwards to help him prepare. I guess maybe he's reading the next day, or just to have it to prepare for a different year. And he's listening that night. He was listening to the Megillah reading, and he realized the Bakore missed one word. He had the tape recorder right there, and he realized the Bakore missed one word, and it was already in the middle of the night. So he found a Rebbe who was up, or he woke someone up, and he said, "What should we do?" So they listened to the recording, and it was very clear that he had skipped a word. So they went around the yeshiva and had Purim nights. Hopefully, no one was in too much of a drunken stupor. It was still before morning. So at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, they woke up as many people as they could. They came back into the Beis Medrash, and they learned the Megillah again. And from then on, that Balkore, I know, made sure that word which he skipped, he made sure never to ever, like he'd always emphasize that word, he made sure never to skip it again. But that's the appropriate thing to do. If a person misses even one word, then they should hear the Megillah again. But there is a way to make it up if a person's still in the middle of the Megillah. Okay, and the way to make it up would be as follows. Before that, just a brief introduction to why this helps. So the reason why a person can make it up is because even though a person needs to hear the Megillah, and the Megillah, you can't read the Megillah from a chumash. You have to either be reading yourself from a cloth, from a scroll on parchment, or to be hearing it from someone who's reading from a cloth. But to read it from a chumash, that you can't do. So if you have a cloth in front of you, you're not reading the Megillah, but if you have a cloth in front of you, so you don't have to hear the whole Megillah from the same person. Right? Let's say in the middle they wanted to switch Bakores, you'd be allowed to do that. So therefore, if you missed a word, let's say you're in the middle of the Megillah, and it's right after a Haman, and the Bakore starts before they're done banging, or they were done banging and someone banged again, you missed a word. You missed the word Vayomer. So you can quickly say the word Vayomer to yourself, and then continue on with the Chazan. It's a little bit tricky because you have to hear the Megillah in order. So while you're saying Vayomer, the Bakore hopefully the Bakore continued reading. So you have to quickly read along with him, or not read along with him, but you have to say the word that you missed, and you have to catch up to him. And therefore, that's going to work because you heard most of the Megillah from the Bakore, and then a couple words you said yourself. That's not a problem. But that's if you have a Megillah in front of you. What about if you don't have a Megillah in front of you? So even if you don't have a Megillah in front of you, you still could say the words to yourself. Why is that? Because Megillah is different. Megillah is unique than the other lanings. When it comes to the other lanings, when it comes to laning from the Torah, so if the Torah is missing one word, even one letter, the whole Torah is invalid. If we're reading from the Torah and we see the Torah is missing a word, so we can no longer read from that Torah. We have to put it away and take out another Torah. But when it comes to Megillah, that's not true. A Megillah is kosher. Even if it's missing up to half the Megillah. right? Even if it's missing a whole bunch of words, it's missing half the Megillah, it still doesn't matter. It's still a valid Megillah. If it's missing the majority of Megillah, then it's invalid. But as long as it has most of it, so then it's okay, even if it's missing a number of words. So what does the Chazan do? Let's say you're reading from such a Megillah. So the Chazan's obviously going to have to read those words by heart. If it was missing the word Vayomer, if it was missing the word Haman, if it was missing the word, whatever it is, right? Mordechai, right? If it's missing any word that's missing, if it's missing the word, so you can still read from that Megillah, but the Bakore is obviously going to have to read that word by heart because it's not written there. You can't skip the word; all the words have to be said, but he can read that word by heart. So what we learn from there is that even though you have to hear the Megillah from a kosher scroll, but since if the scroll's missing words, you can say those words by heart. The same thing, if the Chazan saying it by heart is no worse than you saying it from your Chumash. So if you miss words, even if you miss, let's say, a majority of the words, or not a majority, up to a majority of words, you miss many words, you missed a quarter of the words, it doesn't matter. As long as you hear the majority of the words from the Chazan, you can read from a Chumash, you can make up as many words as you miss. As many words as you miss, you can make up on your own from the Chumash. Again, you have to hear all the words in order. So when you miss the word, you have to say it, and you have to continue reading from that point on until you catch up to the Chazan. But once you do that, so then you caught up to the Chazan, and now you hear from him again. So that's what a person should do. The exception to this rule would be if you miss the beginning or the end. The beginning or the end, that you have to hear. So you have to hear the majority of the words from a scroll, and you have to hear the beginning and the end. But as long as you didn't miss the beginning or the end, then you're going to be okay. That works. If you walk in 3 seconds late to Megillah reading, and he already said the words Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, and you walk into Shol and he says Hu Achashverosh, too late, right? Too late. You already missed the beginning. Then you can't make it up on your own. But as long as you were there on time and you heard the beginning and you heard the end, and you just missed some words in the middle, up to half the words, so then you could fill them in on your own. So again, you have to hear every word, either from the Bakori or you saying it yourself or somebody else. But you don't have to hear every word from a Megillah. So therefore, if you missed a word, you can catch up. It's not easy, especially if the Bakori is reading fast. So best thing is to make sure you hear all the words. But if someone missed any of the words, so then that's okay. That would be the way to make it up. Okay. A person has to hear the Megillah live, can hear a recording of the Megillah, even to hear it over Zoom, even to hear it with a microphone is a very, very big question. Especially last year, there were some poskim who were lenient because of COVID. People were very nervous about COVID, and the year before, although the year before COVID hadn't really set in, but there were many opinions. There were, or I'm not going to say many, but there were some opinions who were lenient. We personally at our show didn't do that. I thought it was worthwhile to try to make other arrangements. And for sure this year, where we're holding, I don't think anyone should listen on Zoom. Again, there are those who argue, and they do have what to rely upon. If a person, whatever, can't make it to show, so definitely reach out to me, and we'll hopefully be able to make the appropriate. We'll hopefully be able to make the appropriate arrangements. We definitely don't want it to be that from now on, why bother coming to shul anymore? We'll just listen from home on Zoom. It's not what we want. People should be coming to shul and should be hearing it from a kosher Megillah. Okay. Also, when a person hears the Megillah, they should have in mind that they're fulfilling the mitzvah. They should just, which normally we announce that in the beginning, they should have in mind that they're fulfilling the mitzvah. And also when we make the brachos, the Bakora makes the brachos, but you should have in mind that he's being motzi you, he's helping you, he's saying the brachos on your behalf. If for whatever reason you missed the brachos, or you didn't hear the brachos, or they didn't say the brachos, you're still yotze the Megillah. You should say the brachos, but again, if you didn't hear the brachos, you're still yotze the Megillah. but again, obviously, ideally, we want to say the brachos. And also, when a person says the bracha of Shachianu in the morning, they should also have in mind for the other mitzvahs. We say really we should say Shachianu on all the mitzvahs of Purim, but we only say it for Megillah. So therefore, you should have in mind when you either say or hear the Shachianu on the Megillah in the morning that it's going on the other mitzvahs of the day of Matanas Lavyonim and Matanas Lavyonim and Mishloach Manos and the Suda, the meal. Okay. Next, and when it comes to davening, we add into both Shemona Esrei and into benching, we add in Al Hanisim, and it's added into benching where it is in the bencher and the sitter, in the bracha of Noda and the bracha of Modim. The basic rule is that if a person forgot Al Hanisim, they do not need to repeat benching. They do not need to repeat Shemona Esrei. If they remember before they concluded that bracha, so then they can go back and say it. But once they conclude the bracha and start the next bracha, then they cannot go ahead and say it. In Shemona Esrei, you can add it in before the hiratzon at the end, before you take 3 steps back. And in benching, you could add it in at the harachamans at the end. Okay. That is Al Hanisim. There's no mention of Al Hanisim in Al Mechi. We don't mention anything about Hanukkah, about Purim or Hanukkah for the matter. Al Hanisim for Hanukkah and Purim. We don't add that into Al Mechi. It's just into benching. Okay. Other customs on Purim. There is a custom to wear costumes on Purim or wear masks on Purim. There are those who attribute it in some people's mind, they look at it as a childish thing, but the truth is there are legitimate sources for this minute. So there's definitely nothing wrong, and maybe even a positive thing for adults to wear costumes as well, to wear a mask as well. It should be an appropriate costume. We should use our seichel, but it's definitely a positive thing and a nice minhag to wear costumes or masks on Purim. There's a very big discussion, which we don't really have time to get into now, but there's a very big discussion about wearing a costume which you would normally be prohibited to wear. So, for example, let's say the costume has shatnez. So you'd have to know exactly how it has shatnez, how it has wool linen. If it has wool and linen, which in a way where it's biblically prohibited, that for sure you cannot wear. If it's only rabbinically prohibited, there are some opinions that say it's okay. There are some opinions that say that even though normally men can't wear women's clothes or women wear men's clothes, on Purim that would be okay. Again, it's a discussion. There are those that say it is appropriate, not appropriate. I think first a person should decide, is this in the spirit and the kedusha and the holiness of Purim? But even if it is, again, depending on what exactly it is and what exactly the clothes are, it could be that there is some room to be lenient, but in general, would probably be worthwhile to be stringent and not to wear anything which is normally prohibited. And also when it comes to Purim, when it comes to Purim, what about going to work on Purim? So the truth is that it's definitely, if a person has a choice, it's definitely better not to work on Purim. I believe it's the Shulchan Aruch or the Ramah that says that even if you do go to work on Purim, you're not going to really see bracha, you're not going to see blessing from that money. It depends on the situation. Some people are able to take off Purim. I asked the shul if I can take off for Purim and go on vacation. They told me I can't, so I'm forced to work on Purim. But if a person is able it was a joke. It was a joke. If a person is able to take off from work, that would definitely be ideal. If a person can't take off from work, they need to work, then it is permitted. They should try as best as they could to make sure they're in the Purim spirit, and for sure to make sure that they fulfill all the mitzvahs. Right? It's definitely possible to do. You have your Purim meal, you listen to the Megillah, your Matanos Avyonim, and Rishlach Manos. It's definitely possible to get it all in. But again, a person should try again. Ideally, try to avoid it if they can't, and they can't. If anyone has specific questions, definitely feel free to reach out. All right. Are there any questions before we conclude?
No, we're good. Thank you, Rabbi.
All right. Thank you very much for joining.